So I learned to knit less than 2 months ago. About 6 weeks ago, I just looked at the calendar. And in that time, I've already completed a pair of socks and today a hat for a baby. Yes, it's on a pumpkin. That's about the size of a baby head, I think. I had no prior knowledge of knitting. I hadn't knit as a child or something and picked it back up. Like, truly just learned 6 weeks ago. I want to talk to you about what I learned about knitting while knitting these socks as an absolute beginner. So I did recently make a video that I will link on the screen talking about like beginning of knitting, and I was halfway through one sock when making that and talked about some things there. I dove into what a lot of people consider a more advanced project. They're not really, which I will get to, but I saw from my last video a bunch of people commented saying, oh my god, you've been knitting at that time less than a month and you're already knitting socks. I've been knitting for 20 years and I've never knit socks. Da, da, da. So like I, beginner, didn't know how potentially intimidating this project was. So you might think like, oh, other people that are getting into socks and things like that, it's just because they have prior knowledge. No. And anyway, let me tell you what I learned about socks and why I actually think socks are a great beginner project more so than a scarf or like a washcloth, which is what everybody seems to recommend. So even though I didn't know that the socks were like an intimidating project, I did strategically pick socks as a thing that I knew would teach me a lot about like different techniques and stuff, and it did. But specifically why I wanted an in-person sock class instead of just learning on YouTube is I was finding that I had a friend who taught me how to do the basic knit and purl stitches and cast on. Those are like the foundational things you need to just knit something very basic. And I was watching some YouTube videos, but I was finding that there was things that I was doing that I wasn't really seeing what I was doing. Like it took me a couple of weeks to kind of figure out like the visuals, the spatial awareness stuff around knitting. And so having someone else there when I did a thing and go, oh my God, what did I just do? And then show me what I did and how to undo it. That's great. So you don't have to necessarily have a class. But I think that if you can support your local yarn store, then absolutely do that. I went to a local yarn store for this and absolutely recommend it. There's a bunch in my area though, and I know not everyone has that. But if you don't have a local yarn store, checking out if a library has classes, checking out if even just like a Michael's or like a big box store has classes, there's probably a local craft store somewhere, and maybe they don't have a sock class, but a lot of the local yarn stores, if you live in a bigger city, do have sock classes frequently. I've seen that listed as a very common, like either socks or mittens, which I'm sure mittens would teach you similar things because they're just socks for your hands. But I definitely recommend having someone to teach you in some capacity, or again, if you're having a friend teach you, like I just couldn't go and see my friend as often as I probably could have gone to the class, so that's why I was like, hey, I'm gonna do it this way. So it was really helpful to have someone show me as I messed something up what exactly I was doing, or even like in the sock pattern, I think if I would have read that myself as a beginner, I would have been very overwhelmed and very confused, and just having someone go, no, truly follow the pattern. Like, because I think when you're new, or at least what I've experienced, is it sounds wrong. Like, it sounds like maybe I'm not knowing something, and it's like, no, truly just follow the pattern. So having someone there for my first finished object to just tell me to go with the pattern was perfect. And this was also a very easy, it's just a like 1x1 rib cuff, and then it's like 3x1 rib for the rest. And yeah, I mean, I think this is a partridge heel for people that know their knitting things. But she just called it a heel turn and gusset. So yeah, and that's all the construction parts of a sock. So anyway, the reason, like I said, that I went into this class was because I was going to learn a bunch of stuff in that class. Again, I went in knowing nothing besides casting on, knitting, and purling. And that's all they said that you needed for the class. They said also knit in the round. Knitting in the round is easy. Like you knit in a circle. Anyway, it sounds harder than it actually is. In this class, I then learned this 1x1 ribbing cuff, which again is not hard, but it's something that you learn. This 3x1 ribbing, I learned the heel and the heel turn, and then this little thing called a gusset, which is as part of a sock specifically, and then how to decrease down to the toe. In here, I learned both using small circulars, so 10-inch circulars, and DPNs, which are double pointed needles. Some people used both of those. Some people just used DPNs the whole time. Some people use magic loop, which is a method of knitting socks. So, but I learned technically 2 different methods of knitting socks. All of that, oh, and the Kitchener stitch, which is the thing that you do to sew up the toe in a sock that is cuffed down. That is so many things to learn that will then be applied to other things just in a sock class. So ribbing of any type, that's really common in cuffs for sweaters and like collars for sweaters. Decreases is something that you also do in sweaters. I haven't learned increases, which is a thing that you do in sweaters, especially when you're doing like a top-down sweater. So I haven't learned that, but I'm not that worried about it because now I've learned all of these things. So decreases are something that you do for sleeves. It's something that you do like decreases on a sweater and stuff as well. Heel turn and gusset is not necessarily something that you can apply to other garments necessarily, obviously, but it's just a thing that's intimidating. And so therefore, having done it and now done it twice because I did it for the second sock all by myself, that's a good skill to have. And then that Kitchener stitch again is going to be used for other socks, and I'm sure the Kitchener stitch is also used in other things. I know some people said that you do use it sometimes to attach sleeves if you're knitting a certain way with like sleeves and stuff. So that's also something. And like from my first to my second sock is also a huge improvement, which was really cool because I don't know if you can tell. These look like different sizes. They're not. Also, I like counted out the rows and everything. These are the same rows. My gauge just changed a whole ton while I was doing this because at first I was knitting like loose versus tighter versus whatever. So my good sock is actually the smaller sock. That's the one that looks beautiful. I messed stuff up in this sock to a point that I think in the first sock I had added some rows in and done some just like funky things. They both fit me though, honestly. So it's not a big deal. And they're for me. And I kind of like that they're wonky. Like I kind of knew the first sock was going to be wonky and then I was going to perfect it in the second sock. And like, she's just gorgeous. Like, look at that Kitchener stitch, guys. She is a beauty. So yeah, she's gorgeous. She's a little wonky because that's the Kitchener stitch on the first one. Not as good. Sisters Not Twins. And I sort of love it. I'm actually going to put these on now because they're cozy. And there's a blizzard out in Chicago really right now as I'm speaking. There's like 12 inches of snow on the ground. It's wild. So yeah, these were knit up in worsted or Aran weight, which is like weight 4, which is like a heavier one that's not usually used for socks. But honestly, I can see myself knitting a lot more of like this kind of sock for around the house because it's kind of like a cabin sock. They're just like comfy, cozy, you know, heavier yarn. And it's so nice to have wool socks on walking around my house. Like I definitely have some like, I don't know, they're probably cotton or polyester, like chunky socks or whatever that sometimes I wear. These, nothing compares. So now I'm going to be spoiled on handmade socks. So yeah, some other things that I learned, it was also, and this was more so in when I was doing the hat, which I will again show you. This was a hat that I cast on while I was doing the sock class because I also specifically was like, okay, I can learn this, which is technically, I think they call it half fisherman's rib. So it's a kind of ribbing where you knit a row normally and then you purl one and then knit one through the row below the actual like next row, basically. I know that's not, I'm not explaining it very well. That's the instructions. And it makes this like fisherman's rib thing. So in this one specifically, but also towards the end of the sock, I was figuring out that I love metal needles. I said this in the first video that I talked about knitting. I like a metal needle. I like that it slips off easier. But I also found that with this specifically, because I started to knit more relaxed, I started to just like, I wasn't knitting quite as tightly. And it was easier to knit a little looser with what I was doing here with this fisherman's rib. So I started loosening up my knitting, but then the like knitting would be falling more down the needles, not off the needles, but like down the circular needles. So I switched to wood for this one, and that was actually kind of nicer. So now I'm seeing the advantage of having metal and wood needles for different things. I still think I'm going to ultimately be a metal needle girly. I love the way they sound. And it's like slipperier, and I feel like I could just go a little bit faster, which I'm not trying to knit fast or slow or whatever. I find it a more pleasant experience generally, but having this like with wood also was kind of nice. So what I'm doing is I'm asking for a set of metal interchangeable knitting needles for Christmas, but I started to panic because I was like, oh my God, what if I also want wood? And what I decided is I will just buy wood needles as needed for different projects. So like right now, I don't know if I'm going to get that set of needles for Christmas. So I'm going to make a sweater next, which I'll talk about towards the end. And so I ordered some of the sizes I need for that sweater in wood so that if I get the set of metal in a couple weeks after that, then I can swap out if I want to. But I might also with a sweater, if it's like heavier, you know, wood might be easier, might be more grippy, whatever. So anyway, learned the advantages and disadvantages of the different needle types. I was also very cautious of sock island, as people call it, where like you finish one sock and then you don't want to finish the other sock. So as the class was going on, it was a 4-week class and we were only learning things in steps and then kind of had homework. And so we could only do like certain things at a time. We couldn't just like blast through the whole sock. And so I very consciously, because I'd heard of this whole sock problem and sock island problem, is that I would finish my homework on the one sock and then I started the next sock. So by the time I finished sock 1 in the class, like 3 days later, I finished sock 2 because I was already down to doing, I had finished the whole foot and I just had to do the toe, basically. So that did require me to get one additional set of needles, but I'm fine with that because I do kind of think I will be knitting socks. I decided that like after like the second week of class, I was like, okay, let me start the second sock because I'm pretty confident that I will keep knitting socks. I do find this fun. So yeah, I think that's a good investment for me. I am now interested in trying things like magic loop, which is a method you can use to knit socks on like a larger cable. And you can also use magic loop to knit 2 at a time, or traveling loop, or there's different techniques for knitting socks. So it'd be cool kind of to be like, instead of having to knit 2 different socks and like different needles, do it all on the same needle. So that's something that I'm interested in trying at some point too. So I mentioned that I also finished this hat, which as you can tell is knit in a baby size. I literally finished this today as of the filming of this video. And look, I did so good, honestly. Like, I'm so proud of this, which was an indicator for me actually that I mentioned in my last video talking about like beginner stuff or whatever, that I was thinking about knitting more things in like baby sizes like this to just practice different techniques and stuff. What I found with this is I'm now sad that I can't just like keep this, even though I wouldn't necessarily wear this. I don't know. It's not necessarily my style. But I also found that in addition to just being like, oh, like I can't really do anything with this, besides let's just give it away, which is what I plan to do. I also found that it was harder to convince myself to go back and fix mistakes with this. I did do that. I actually did that with this in the socks. Like throughout this time period of like the last, month, I've realized like what mistakes I made and how to fix them, which is great. Like I forced myself to fix things, even with like the sock. Like I found myself with the first sock being like, well, that's going to be the wonky sock. I don't have to fix it. I'm like, no, go back and learn how to fix that thing, because at some point you're going to want to know how to fix that thing. And that's like just the thing with knitting is like, you're going to need to fix things because you're going to mess up no matter how expert you are at a thing. So I think that's kind of cool about knitting, honestly. So I found that even though I did go back and fix many things, like there was like some drop stitches and stuff, there are definitely some things in here that like, honestly, you can't really tell, but there are some things that like are probably a little bit more wonky, and I'm also fine with that because it is a beginner thing, but there's just like, the ribbing's not perfect. There's definitely times that like I was looser in one row and tighter in another row with like my stitches or whatever. I mean, again, the top looks pretty good. I don't know, like it generally looks pretty good, but I did find that there were times that I know I didn't go back and fix something that was like a little off, because I was like, well, I'm going to give it away anyway. And I don't even know who it's going to. So I think the thing is I actually can't knit baby knits because I'm not knitting them for anyone that I know. And I know this might sound like kind of shitty, but I think most people will probably understand this because there's a number of people who do a lot of gift knits or do just knits for themselves, and they call themselves selfish knitters, but I don't think that's selfish. It's like literally your hobby. You're allowed to do what you want. But I was finding that because I'm just making this for a anonymous potential person, like I was not having as much like attention to detail as when I was knitting things for myself. Like even the socks, it's like, okay, I'm still gonna wear these and yes, they're on their feet and you're not really gonna see them and whatever. But I'm like, okay, I think I need to knit things that are either for myself or intended for someone that I know, so that I'm actually being like as on top of things and perfectionist about it in the way that I want to be, not in a way that is like putting too much pressure on myself, but like I want to learn these things. And so I think my baby knit plan is not what I'm going to do next. I'm actually going to just make items for people that I know or creatures, because I think instead of making baby knits, I might be knitting dog sweaters. I think that'll work. I think it's going to serve the same purpose. But I'm actually, instead of doing a dog sweater first, I am going to do a sweater for myself. I already bought the yarn for it. And not too far in advance because I already finished that hat. I didn't think I was going to finish that hat this soon, but I did. The final thing that I learned with both the hat and the socks is that there are things that look and sound hard, but actually aren't. So like with this half fisherman's rib, like it sounds like that's a complicated technique. And when I first was doing it, I was like, oh my God, knitting in the row below? What do you mean? And then you do it and you're like, oh, that's not that bad. And like even there are parts of the sock that felt a little bit more complicated, or like they just felt not intuitive, because there's parts when you're doing like a heel and stuff where you're flipping your work halfway through a row and it can just feel like very wonky, but if you follow the pattern, you're fine. And so I think that's, again, another good lesson for me is to just like follow the instructions, like do what it says, and you can learn how to fix it if you need to fix it. And things that look hard, like I should take the sock back off. Like there's things about this, and maybe you can't see it like super well. Okay, no, you can. You know, the like heel, see that little like beautiful, oh, she's so gorgeous. Like that's like the gusset part, like the heel turn, the gusset. It looks like it would be hard. It's not. It's really not. You just, once you learn it, it's fine. So yeah, I think socks are a great beginner project. So as a beginner, you know, so one of my things that is actually now one of my pet peeves with knitting, and I think one of the reasons that I didn't learn any sooner with knitting and like fiber arts is that people typically say, and even in this sock class, there were some people in the sock class that found out I was a new knitter, and they're like, oh, a great beginner project is a scarf. And I was like, I'm in a sock class because I think knitting a scarf would be so boring. And I think so many people knit a scarf as their first project, even if they're not necessarily wanting to knit scarves, because I don't really wear, like I have a scarf that I've had forever. I don't need another scarf, right? So I'm like, why do you tell people to knit scarves or like washcloths, which like a wool washcloth is a very specific thing that not everyone's going to be into. Like me, the thought of having a wool washcloth makes me want to puke. Like I don't like that sensation. Wool, other things is fine for me. A washcloth, gross. So yeah, like I think that we do people a disservice with new hobbies sometimes by dumbing them down so much. And if you want to knit a scarf and like you genuinely want to knit a scarf, great. But I think so many people are told to knit scarves when they don't really want to, and then they get bored and they don't want to do it anymore. Like if I would have knit a scarf for my first project, I probably would have already stopped and been like, I don't want to do it anymore because it's boring. Like it's, most scarves are just basic stockinette stitch, which if you don't know, it's just like that's the most basic stitches you can do. And it's not really teaching you anything. You're just doing that forever, which again, if you want to, because that's a project you genuinely want to do, sick, love it. I didn't want to knit a scarf. And the reason I got into knitting, which I mentioned in my last video, is to make colorwork sweaters. I don't want to knit a scarf. I can knit a colorwork scarf, but you're not going to jump into a colorwork scarf right away. So yeah, I think a sock is actually something that you should dive into sooner rather than later. And there are so many beginner patterns, but there's also so many classes, and I'm a big sock advocate now. And I know not everyone's into socks. Like I don't think you need to keep making socks if you don't want to. I think it's just the perfect beginner project for teaching you a lot and giving you like a huge boost in confidence. Like obviously I was a little confident going into it anyway because I'm an ambitious beginner and I have dreams of the things that I want to knit and I have a goal in mind, and so I'm doing it. But even if you're not a super ambitious beginner, you will get so much more confident from knitting a sock than like anything else. I think if you knit a scarf, you're going to be like, well, I don't really know how to do anything else. Like, and so I think picking a project, even if it's not a sock, like maybe it's a mitten, maybe it's a hat that has like something funky about it, like the fisherman's rib or whatever. I think even a hat is a better beginner project than a scarf is. So yeah, those are the things that I've learned from knitting these first things. These are my first two finished objects. I'm very proud of them. And yeah, my next plan is a sweater, which I will start as soon as I get the needles for it. So I ordered the needles and then I picked up the yarn just a couple days ago because I knew I was going to start that next. And I'm so glad that I did, because it's not like I'm stashing stuff up. It's just like, that's my next project. So yeah, I'm excited to do that. It's a step-by-step sweater, which I know a lot of people do for a first sweater, and I'm very excited. I'm doing it in single color. I'm not doing it in scraps or anything. So yeah, but I will have more videos on knitting coming for Vlogmas if you like that, talking about things I want to learn, projects I want to do, stuff like that, because I'm just very excited about it. So yeah, comment below and let me know if you've ever knit socks and what you thought of them, or like what was your first beginner project? Was it a scarf? Was it a washcloth? Do you have opinions about that now? Yeah, so thank you all for watching, and I'll see you guys soon. Bye.